Hey guys, this is Tyler here. I'm here in Estonia, and I'm going to discuss with you guys about my experience living in Chile and what it taught me being in a Chilean university about dating and relationships in Chile. Okay, so I was in South America for about 2 years. It was from 2013 to 2015, and I was a student, and then I also worked part-time at a university. It was on the coastline of Chile, not in Santiago, in a city west of Santiago. And I studied at a very premier business and economic university of Chile. This university, Adolfo Ibáñez, is very well known. It also has a reputation for having a fairly attractive demographic of young women. And this was for the most part true. I think it may have been a little overhyped though. But one thing I can certainly say is that being in this environment gave me kind of a better understanding and perception of the inflated expectations of young women in universities nowadays. Okay, I was also at university in USA, in Minnesota. It was similar in some ways, but also very different. But I think most of my university time, I wasn't very connected with people in Minnesota, whereas in Chile, I think I was much more connected to students on a day-to-day basis. And it was very enlightening experience for me during my time there. I've spoken about Chile before, and this is a country that is very quickly embracing this MGTOW philosophy. It's very obvious for any guys who have lived in Chile or who have traveled there before, and of course Chilean guys. It's really crazy how Chile has evolved in the past 30 years. If you go 30 years ago, 25 years ago, it was actually a pretty good place, honestly, for a Chilean guy who wanted to get married or have a girlfriend or whatever. But it's changed very quickly in the past 2 decades. Now, it's worth noting that if we know about South America, it was very common historically for couples to meet and to get acquainted in their university and to then have long-term relationships and often even marriages. This was very common in universities all throughout South America, especially if we were to look at countries such as Argentina, Chile, Brazil, Uruguay. These places kind of all shared this commonality. Over recent years, the percentage of young people in Chile that have enrolled at universities has increased, and also the rate of women in universities has also gone up a lot. And this has had a lot of impact on the overall climate of universities. It's also changed a lot in terms of the expectations that guys must bring to the table and the overall dating climate in universities in Chile. Note that as a foreign guy, while I was at this university in Chile, I didn't have much advantage. In fact, I think if anything, I probably had more disadvantage when it came to the dating and relationship environment. And this made it very challenging because I had anticipated coming in as a foreign guy, having a pretty good package, you could say, that I was going to have a fairly easy time at finding a girlfriend, and this was not the case, unfortunately. And I also found that many other guys were in my same situation, both foreign and domestic guys who were at the university. At the end of the day, actually, very few Chilean guys from the university ended up finding girlfriends there, and the ones who found girlfriends typically found girlfriends outside the university. Many of the younger ladies at the university would have boyfriends, but they often were not from the university. Sometimes they were, but it was very interesting that it was very much single guys and then girls that had these boyfriends or even husbands. It kind of too demonstrated this sense of hypergamy here. And it was absolutely very frustrating. I mean, when you're surrounded by very attractive girls and you're basically, you know that you maybe can get their number, but they're probably not going to be interested. I understood that I had to be realistic about my expectations here. This was also before I was aware of MGTOW philosophy and more of the red pill community. So I wasn't really cute to natural hypergamy in these areas. I did notice though that often the younger women at the university, fellow students, typically what they often desired in guys, the traits that they brought to the table, It was very challenging for a guy who was, say, my age at the time. I was age 20 and 21 years old. I was honestly just too young for these gals. I mean, if I had been older, and this is one of the first issues I think, and this is a problem in many universities around the world, and especially in Chile, in America, there's not enough of an age difference. Often there's kind of this 7 to 10 year difference that creates the highest sense of hypergamy. I don't think it has to be that big, but often when we're talking like 1, 2, maybe 3 year age difference, it's often not enough. And the inclination of younger women to men, their natural inclination is you're probably not going to be as desirable to them as an option compared to a guy who was maybe 25 or even older, 30. I was very aware that, I mean, there were students at the university, some of these girls, they had husbands who were probably over 30 years old. These were like 20, 22-year-olds. I knew of a few that were actually already married. And these guys were actually pretty well established. So I really started realizing that this age thing actually made a big impact. Whether we were talking about Chile or even in other countries, this was off. My brother, for example, he lives over in Russia in St. Petersburg. And over there, he's considered old for his class. He's also in his late 20s. And most of the students that he's with at the university are in like their early to mid 20s or even in their late teens. This is very normal, and he's naturally kind of looked at as more of a leader in his classes because he's older than most of them. So he's able to kind of appeal naturally to a lot of younger ladies at his university. He already has a girlfriend, mind you. She actually studies at the university. They met actually online. Kind of an interesting story, but I noticed this too. I had a friend when I was in Chile. He was Canadian, and it was the same situation for him. He was in his late 20s, enrolled at a university. He was older than most of these people. He had a very easy time finding attractive girls to go out with from his university. He met a few, and I think this really demonstrates this concept of hypergamy. So for these Chilean guys or foreign guys, this is something I would really emphasize to them, is that you want to look at as a university for dating. For a foreign guy, if you're going to one of these countries, you're better off being a little bit older. Like if you're like at least 24 or 25, 26, it's going to be much more advantageous than being like 20 years old as I was. I was 20. It's the same thing for a Chilean guy. If you're a younger guy, it's going to be typically a little more difficult than a guy who's say like 25, 30. Now, mind you though, so often there will be limitations. When we're looking at a university environment, once you're, say, over early 30s, maybe mid 30s, especially in Chile or Eastern Europe, it's probably actually going to be working against you. My brother actually is in class with a guy who's from a Middle Eastern country, and he's like in his mid 40s. It actually goes against him in certain respects. So it will start working against you in this respect. I also noticed that in Chilean university, it's a very clique-like mentality. When I was at the university, to me, it kind of reminded me of being in high school. And I was really shocked at this because in university environment in America, especially larger universities, it's not really this clique environment. This just is not the case. And this was a real shocker. I remember I knew a guy and he was kind of making fun of my Spanish at the time. I didn't speak it so well. And with some other people, and they were kind of like snickering about it or something. He made this joke. I was in the class at the time with him, and for me, it didn't really bother me a lot, but it kind of reminded me of something I would see in high school in the U.S., and I was really surprised. I was like, these guys are very like cliquish, and the girls are the same way. It's very cliquish environment, which makes it really challenging. If you're a guy at a Chilean university, whether you're foreign, and even worse if you're domestic, there's a bad reputation about you. There's a lot of rumors that get passed around in Chilean universities. The Chilean guys here can testify to this. You will not have success with a single girl in that university. At least any attractive girl, you will have no success with. They will have already kind of ruined your name, and you'll be out of the picture at this point. And even a guy who's like kind of like sleeping around, if it gets it's with too many people, this can actually also be frowned upon, which is interesting because in other South American countries, like in Argentina, this can serve as a kind of sense of validation if the guy's been kind of known for being the player, we'll say. Not always is this the case in Chile, but it's sometimes the case in certain universities. Sometimes it's the opposite. It just depends on the person and the type of people that are. Also note that often there's group projects, there's group work that has to be done. I myself kind of made the mistake of being a little too aggressive, you might say, trying to get a date or two from girls that I had worked on projects with, which I should have been more reserved about. And I think Chilean guys can also testify to this one. There may seem like a lot of interest from the girl. You could be working on a project and maybe just you and the girl. There may be 2 or 3 other people. You guys have a lot of correspondence for a couple weeks, and you may assume, because I think sometimes it's a little more warm, the environment, with if you're working with another girl than you'd be used to if you're back in the US, that the girl's inherently interested in you. And you may find out very quickly that they're not, and they may in fact have a boyfriend, and this is really discouraging, honestly. And so one of the things you can do here, maybe some Chilean guys know this, is just kind of test the waters. You can kind of figure out if the girl has a boyfriend, or they may have some interest in you. You just got to be very subtle about this. And if you're not subtle, this can come off a little too hard. And that's one of the things that I would have done differently. I would have probably been a little more casual about this, but just understand that these group projects are very common. You may have a very hot girl in your group, and you kind of have to you have to approach it with a very objective mind and just not get emotionally attached. If there's an opportunity that presents itself, great, but this isn't like in other Latin countries where even if the girl had a boyfriend, they would still be willing to like maybe hook up with you. This may happen, but if that does, it's probably someone from her social circle she would do that with. It wouldn't be just some random domestic guy or even foreign guy. This typically wouldn't happen. In the last lesson that I learned is, if you can learn and speak the language, you'll have a huge advantage. At this time, it was in my first semester in the country. I did not speak very good Spanish, and I also didn't understand it that well. And so it was very difficult to communicate. This is applicable with guys also living in other countries, but if you can understand the language of the country, and I noticed this too with Chilean guys who are with foreign girlfriends. Chilean guys would never have success with a foreign girl if they didn't know the language, if they couldn't speak English, couldn't speak German. They would almost always speak the language very well, and this is typically the case. If you have the language, it's a huge asset when it comes to creating a sort of relationship. And you'll be able to adapt a lot more and just command a lot more respect when you're in like a university environment. You'll be able to really show people that you're with it. And you'll also really be able to contribute in projects which will help just command more respect among your peers. And this goes a long way. So this is my input here, and give me your feedback below. Thank you.